Vermentino. So, right, here we are. All
I
right.
just got back from book tour.
You just came on in time, virtual
Are we ready
audience.
to go?
So thank you for coming this evening, live audience, virtual audience. Thank you for joining us. And you've just heard that we had a lovely pre-event dinner with wine. So I don't know how you two are doing, but I'm going to sit over here and try to, probably going to be the dormouse.
I don't have a single problem in the world. Are you kidding?
Right.
So,
but tonight is the book launch for the second book by Jeffery and Isabella called The Grave Artist, with Sanchez and Heron as their protagonists. And I don't know, why did you decide to have a serial killer picking off people at a wedding?
Because, and I should say, is anyone here on their honeymoon? No,
I
that's
think
good.
you're safe
Is anybody about to get engaged? Don't. It will not end well. Well, thank you, Barbara. Thanks to Patrick and everyone at the wonderful Poison Pen bookstore. Thank you. That's a good question. I've been on tour. I'm in between Italy, the East Coast, England, and now I'm in. I can tell because of the heat, right? We're in Arizona. Welcome everyone, and we are here to talk about the Grave Artist, the second in the Sanchez and Heron series, and I guess we'll kind of talk about how it got going. And the idea was originally Isabella's, who had said she liked the idea of a honeymoon killer. And we went from there. So why don't you start with where that came from, and we'll kind of talk about how we put the whole thing together.
Oh, yeah, sure. I'm the twisted one. Okay, no. People have, you have 50 books, more than 50. People know that, it's not just me. Yeah. So we were discussing it, and we were thinking, okay, what can be worse than becoming the victim of a serial killer? Like, how can you take a bad situation and make it horrific? Well, what if it happened on your wedding day? That's got to be like the worst of the worst. This is a challenge that, as like mystery thriller authors, that we have is kind of, how do you up the stakes? And especially with a serial killer, it's been done so much that we did have to kind of challenge ourselves to think about that.
In Hollywood, there's this adage: when a producer wants to do a new movie, he or she is looking for something that has been wildly successful in the past and yet has never been done before. And we laugh because it's Hollywood and it's easy to laugh at Hollywood, but there's kind of some truth to that. And so what Isabella and I do, both in our individual books, but also in our Sanchez and Heron series, is look for I guess I would call it the template, and that's a thriller, a book that takes place over a short period of time, moves very quickly, it has a lot of internal reversals, it has some big surprise endings, so that we're going to do all the time, but we need something different. And so I got the idea that, okay, serial killer, we're going to fit that into our story, but it has to be somebody different. Serial killing 2.0. And that's what Damon Gar, our villain, has come up with. And do you want to talk a little bit about that? To the extent, we have to be careful.
Yeah.
You'll notice us falling into silences. It's not because you're boring or anything like that. It's that there's so many twists. We don't want to give any of that away.
We do have to be very careful. We have to maintain the surprise, no spoilers. So that was another part of it, is if we're trying to, again, we always want to challenge ourselves to do something fresh and different. Although, like Jeff was just talking about, what do they always say? I want the same thing but different. Well, that's kind of like the serial killer thriller concept. So it's like, how do we make it better? How do we make it more challenging? And so somewhere along the line, actually, Jeff was the one that came up with the idea of serial killing 2.0. So what makes it different? What is next level? And if you think about it, it's 2.0 is always the next iteration of whatever you're doing. So it's like you don't just have your immediate victim, which gives you whatever immediate thrill that a serial killer would have, but it's all the other victims out there, and this is actually on the book jacket, so it's not a spoiler, but that he enjoys he watches the grief of those that are mourning, and he's kind of obsessed with the whole mourning concept. And so that was just, I thought that was really brilliant.
And you know, we've all had those days. You know, you wake up, you go out, you kill somebody, and it's kind of boring, right? Haven't we all? Some of you didn't smile at that, and that makes me a little bit nervous.
Been there, done that.
Yeah, exactly. So, but he was an individual, a very complex individual, and about that we should say that it's very important for the characters in the book, all the characters in the books, to be multidimensional, to be fully fleshed out, and that means the villains too, because the villain is the hero of his or her own story. And so we crafted this fellow, Damon Gar, who was a failed artist, obsessed with art, painting and sculpture and so forth, but he was failed at that. And he can teach it, and he can collect it, but he cannot practice it, which is what he felt his heart's desire was all about. And he, for various reasons of having to do with brain chemistry and psychosis, he said, I need to turn this into some kind of dark, evil thing. He went out and murdered somebody very elaborately, very cleverly. He wasn't satisfied. He's a failed artist, a failed serial killer. But then he had a moment of inspiration, as artists will, and he said, I'm going to combine the two and bring together the love of art and the love of murder and create these tableaus of grief, tableaus of sadness and sorrow, and he would revel in them. And he went from there.
And Jeff is kind of an art aficionado himself, and he's been to museums all over the world. And when he was doing his part of the research, it was really interesting to learn how many artists, especially classical artists, depict mourning and sorrow and grief. And you should put that in.
I was astonished, because that was our motif. We were working with that. And I go to Italy fairly frequently. And if anyone here works for the IRS, just for the record, and you've reviewed my tax return, those were legitimate deductions eating pasta in Florence, because I had to get the atmosphere just right. But I did want to bring some authenticity to the story. And so our character, poor Damon, I say poor Damon from his point of view, and yes, this huge collection of sorrow. Have you seen Christina's World by Andrew Wyeth? Do you know the painting, the girl sitting by herself in that field? Andrew Wyeth's such a brilliant. I didn't make this up. I researched it, but that's considered by some people one of the saddest paintings ever done, because she's by herself and she's dreaming of a world that will be out there, but she's stuck in the Midwest. Now, I don't know whether that's true or not, what Andrew Wyeth, the artist, had in mind, but I know that the relationship between sadness, sorrow, and horror and art is something that really resonated with him. So he's a multidimensional character, but not to dwell too much on him, because our heroes, Sanchez and Heron, off they go to stop him before he kills more.
And of course, because he's obsessed with couples, he ends up looking at Carmen and Jake as kind of a couple, and they become a target of his. And again, that's on the book cover, so it's not a spoiler, but you can imagine they aren't a couple, but he sees them that way. He's like, okay, there's two of them, they're partners. And, again, I mean, I can tell you from a background in law enforcement, you are very close to your partner. And so he realizes this, and he's like, you know what, the damage would be very similar to do with them. So he begins to target them.
And we get a lot of questions. No, they're not a couple. They're partners, professional partners. Probably. And, we...
That on. You've gone that route with other of your characters.
Of course. And, there have been so many popular and literary novels written, and they have a core, they have a theme. It could be angst, it could be existential survival, it could be crime or whatever. Those are all important. But when it comes to the personal relationships, those are just as important. You know, I was talking to my niece about The Last of Us. I don't know if you've seen it. It was a video game, a very wrenching TV series, very well done. Yes, about mushrooms that turn into zombies. It happens all the time, right? But no, it was about a father-daughter relationship. Game of Thrones. It's kind of a love story in a way with with swords. Hunger Games. Yeah, Apocalypse. No, it's a love triangle. We love that love stuff. And so Jake and Carmen, all I can say is stay tuned. We're working on the third book right now. There may be some developments in that area, about which I can say no more.
No, of course, because we have to keep you in suspense. But it is interesting though, but it really is all about relationships. There's quite a few. And because, as Jeff was saying, we like to keep everybody completely multidimensional, and that includes our detectives and or our investigators in this situation. And so they have their own problems that they have to deal with, their personal lives, their family, and we make sure we delve into that. And you will learn more about Carmen's family, and then stay tuned. Again, Jeff and I are now in the process of writing book 3. There may be a little more about Jake's family coming up too.
And I'm not going to mention the cult that his parents were both a part of and neglected Jake and his brother Rudy, and probably turned Jake into an intrusionist, you know, that a term we coined, someone who is very concerned about how the powers that be, whether it's Washington or any place else, intrude into our lives, which kind of brings up another thing that we've been very aware of. So we write the crime story. Are Carmen and Jake going to stop Gar, the serial killer, 2.0 serial killer? The book is a thriller, which we define as being a novel that asks the question, what is going to happen? You know, Agatha Christie, whom I loved, I read all of her books, the Poirot, the Miss Marple, some of her standalone books. She taught me everything I know about twists. But those ask the question, what happened in the past? Dorothy L. Sayers, you know, the Golden Age mysteries. Those are wonderful. We write thrillers. They ask the question, what is going to happen? Will the terrorist be stopped? Will the serial killer be stopped? So we definitely write that theme in the book, but then we also have the, you know, what I call affectionately the soap opera element, and that is the relationships in this book, in The Grave Artist, mostly between Selena and her sister, and then in the next book we're going to look at Jake, and can he reconcile with his parents who have really abandoned the family. They joined a cult called the Family with a capital F and abandoned their lowercase family. And Jake has never quite recovered from that. And can we say anything about Selena and her sister a little
Well,
bit,
yeah, in the
maybe?
sense that, so kind of at the end of book 1, Fatal Intrusion, there is like Jake Heron makes a discovery, and it's not really a secret there. He kind of discovers that there's actually a question or an issue about the death of Carmen's father. And so that just sort of, that's kind of at the end of book 1. And so then in book 2, the one that is launching now, that kind of picks up that story. They were kind of left with this one question. I mean, all of the other plot issues in book 1 were resolved, but that was the kind of hanging question in the air, is what really happened to her father? I don't know. So now we pick up.
Yeah, you need this because ideally nobody in here has had experience with a serial killer, right? Nobody in here is a serial killer, right? Just for the record. But
Not going to admit it, Jeff.
okay, they're
if
not
they
going to
are.
admit it. But we all have family, friends, partners, and so forth. I know you all had parents. I mean, that part goes without question. Possibly children and so forth. And that is as real drama as you can possibly have. And people, they want to know what's going to happen. Is Gar going to get away at the end? I'm not saying anything, but is he going to get away at the end? But okay, that's interesting, but we want to know what happens to the family. And I have my sister, I hope she's watching tonight, actually, Julie Deaver, a very successful young adult author, and she focuses on that element of storytelling. And I learned from her that is so important to Britain, to bring to the stories. And, we write, we might want to mention a little bit about how we approach a book. And we start with an outline. And why don't we go through the whole procedure? So we come up with the germ of an idea, and then come how long Verizon and Sprint and AT&T love us because there's some lengthy phone calls.
Indeed. First of all, we knew when we wanted to start to write together that we wanted it to be a true collaboration. So this was never going to be a situation where one of us was kind of taking over the other one's storyline. We knew we wanted to create something completely new. So in order to do that, we live almost on the opposite coasts. So that's kind of a challenge. But it took a lot of long phone calls. So we knew we wanted to create new characters, and we did. It first started with hours and hours on the phone brainstorming. What kind of characters do we want? How do we want that to work? What kind of story do we want? What's going to be the core of this? And it took a long time for that part to emerge. And then once we kind of had a concept in mind, then it became time to maybe make first a very rough outline. We did a proposal because we were going to get a book contract. And we did, and we had not written together before, so we figured, our agents were helping us with this, and it was well, we better do a proposal so they have some idea, and we did, and so we were able to get a book contract just based on the proposal and a synopsis and an idea of what was going to happen. But then Jeff did what he does best, and then he dove in and started creating an outline.
I can't stop myself. I'm sorry. The world of writers is divided into two camps. One, the pantsers, as in seat of the pants. And these are people who simply sit down with a blank computer screen or blank sheet of paper and start writing. And they let the story go where it will, and the story informs them. And then there are the plotters, like myself. And I am an inveterate outliner because I find it a more efficient way to write, especially with these thrillers, which I said are novels that ask the question, what's going to happen? There's a lot going on. We have 3 plots, maybe more, and the books take place over a short period of time. Did you ever see the TV show 24? Imagine just sitting down and trying to write that and seeing where it went. It wouldn't work. Now, there are a few people who don't use outlines, and my heart goes out to them. I hope they'll be successful someday. Lee Child, Michael Connelly, Stephen King, George R.R. Martin. I feel these poor guys are at sea all the time trying to get those words down on the page. It's what works for you. I tell my students, whatever works, works. But I'm right. You should outline. You should outline first. And so we did. This ended up being about the initial outline was probably, probably 60 chapters, maybe 50 chapters. But then we would go back and forth, and Isabella would say, no, let's change this, let's change that. I'd say, let's change this, let's change that. And our whole theory about writing is defined by no ego. This is not about us. This is about giving you, the readers, the best experience you could possibly have. And that means we had to ruthlessly edit each other. And I'll give you an example. I like my twists and turns, but kind of like the end of Halloween or Friday the 13th, whatever those are, where the guy in the ski mask or whatever he's wearing, the hockey mask, he's been shot and has cut his head off and cut his arms off, and they bury them all in different places, and you turn around and there he is again. And then you dump him out at sea with the weights, and he goes down to the bottom of the ocean, and you turn around and Jamie Lee Curtis says, oh no, there he is again. I tend to do that a little too much. so I had, at the end of it, Fatal Intrusion, I guess it was, I had, another twist, a twist too far. And Isabella said, quite judiciously, are we sure we need this? And I said, no, we don't. And that's the way we worked, and it made it a much better book. In the same way that I think I maybe offered some suggestions about one of your interrogations that.
Yeah, I had an interrogation where, I was probably enjoying myself a little too much, like fantasizing about how much fun it would be to interrogate someone
And
the
this
way
is a woman who has interrogated
I know,
people.
right? The way I would have liked to, and it was a little over the top. And yeah, so Jeff's like, yeah, that's also a bridge too far, I think. Yeah, I'm like, yeah, maybe we should reel that in a bit. It was enough the way it was, and it was kind of funny. It was a little humorous, but it just went a little too far.
And
So-
and I should say the once we had roughed out a first draft, went back and forth many times. We rewrote a great deal, so much so that when I think Isabella said, "Jeff, that was a really good passage," I said, "No, you wrote that," because we didn't know where the line was, where I had written this or she had written that. And the fact is, we really had written everything together, 50 rewrites probably, and so it's a fairly seamless project. Should we tell the story, which you may all have heard about, how we got started in this, the infamous conference in Chicago?
The infamous conference. A lot of people will ask, well, because Jeff, I think you've probably been approached many times to co-author, but he's never done it. I've never co-authored either. It's not something we've ever done, and so people are kind of curious. How did that happen? So it started back in, I believe it was 2017. There was a conference called Murder and Mayhem in Chicago. Jeff is actually a native of Chicago. I don't think you live there anymore, but
No, I left in the 70s on the heel of a snowstorm, which dumped 4 feet of snow, and for the next 30 days. The temperature never got above freezing and often didn't get above zero. So in answer to your question, no, I don't live there anymore.
No, my goodness. Yeah. Actually, that reminds me, when I moved to Arizona, like one of the things I took great joy in doing was selling my snowblower. It's like, I never want to see this thing again. I was just sick of it. But anyway, so it was St. Patrick's Day. So they had dyed the river green, which I didn't even know was a thing until I got I'd never been to Chicago before. I can't believe they dye the river green. And so they had this big writers conference, and Jeff and I were both there, and we were both speaking there, and we had never met. And so I was in the green room, and interestingly, Gillian Flynn was there, she of the Gone Girl fame. Was also there at the same time. So the three of us just started riffing, and we were joking about, like, what if the three of us wrote a book together? How would it be? And especially with like my background, it had to involve something criminal, and and Jeff too. And so we had the most ridiculous idea, and it was all about how to make each other laugh, and we were cracking each other up. And the concept became that, what if we had like a crime boss that was like an infant? And how funny would that be, like a serious criminal? And I think the punchline was his diapers weren't the only thing that was loaded. And but yeah, we just liked each other's bizarre sense of humor. And then we met again at another conference called Thriller Fest in New York City. They have it every year in Manhattan. It's put on by international thriller writers. And we met again there, and it was the same thing. We just laughed and just enjoyed each other's company. And then it became a little bit more of a discussion of like, how is this going to work or whatever, what would be funny about, writing together. I know my agent knew Jeff too. She was very encouraging about this as well. And then we bumped into each other again at the Poison Pen when Jeff I forget which book it was you were launching. And then afterwards, after leaving here, we went and talked about it. It's like, okay, let's have a serious conversation now. We've bumped into each other multiple times.
Yeah, and let's just see what happens. And I am on record as saying I don't play well with others. I've had some TV shows done, I've had some movies done, and never been involved in the productions because a movie and TV show, and I love TV, Tracker, a wonderful show. Justin Hartley, Ken Olin, wonderful, CBS #1 show. wonderful. No interest in being involved in that because you have to work with other people. Oh, I mean, what's the fun of that? You know, right now I get to sit in a dark room with my dogs at my feet, and they as long as I give them milk bones, they validate everything I do. I say, "Is that a good passage?" Chum 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 chum. Oh yeah, good. Okay, but then you know we decided we had the same sensibility, and we also write the same kind of book. It's that thriller, shifting points of view. I could not write with another author who wrote only first person and a more introspective non-outline book. So we do the same kind of thing. So we gave it a shot, and Fatal Intrusion did very well. Now we're sure the Grave Artist will do very well, and the company was happy enough to, with the results, to give us a contract for a third book, which we still have to write. I mean, there is that, you know. As much as we love ChatGPT, you know, it ain't really going to write a novel for you.
No, we do not. Let me just put that out there right now. We do not have anything to do with AI writing. It's okay for research, but you know what? You can't even trust it thoroughly with research because it will hallucinate. So you have to like double check. You can't trust it for anything. We have to do our own stuff. And then even what you ask it to research, you have to double check on that.
When it comes to AI, I tell my students in my course, large language models, which is the basis for ChatGPT and Claude and Gemini and so forth, are certainly capable of writing, and they are technically capable of writing fiction, but they are better at writing nonfiction and fairly short forms such as memos and synopses of things and emails. But when it comes to fiction, they lack the emotional resonance that's required for fiction. And equally important, a failing is that they have secured data from a misrepresented source of information, and that women and writers of color are misrepresented. You heard what I just said? Every word, which I've memorized, was written by ChatGPT in response to my question, can you write fiction? And if that doesn't scare you, I don't know what does.
Yeah, self-admitted not able to write stuff. So yeah, so we don't do that.
And the next day my bank account was emptied. I don't know what happened, but...
So yeah, we get to work, and once the outline, like Jeff will take the first pass at doing like a pretty thorough outline, and then I get it at that point, and then I go in there, and a lot of times I'm into like short, punchy chapters with, hooks or springboards at the end. So sometimes I'll go in there and I'll like cut a scene in half that I think, couldn't be punchier and shorter, and I see a good ending spot, whatever. So I go in there and I fiddle with it and work on it as well. And then we trade the outline back and forth multiple times before we start writing any of the prose. And then at that point, that's when we start, dividing up. That is kind of the beauty of having an outline, is each one of us can be like, I'm kind of feeling this scene. I think I'll write this, I do write more of the Carmen Sanchez chapters. He writes more of the Professor Heron chapters, but we both write in the others' chapters as well, and then we both edit.
Yeah, and we kind of flip a coin, because half the fun of doing this is writing the bad guy, And again, we write from close, kind of a technical writing term, a third-person point of view, past tense, and that is, he walked into the room, and then we shift a point of view, and it could be from, say, a woman's point of view. She saw him walk into the room. Why do we do that? Because we like twists and turns. And if you want to be I say an illusionist, if you want to misdirect the audience, the best way to do it is by shifting points of view. Why? Because if you're in the first person, you have to rely on using the verb advisedly, on an unreliable narrator. So if you're from the point of view of a serial killer and in first person, and he or she never mentions that, I just disposed of the body, it gets a little, you're cheating a little bit, and the readers will think, give me a break. He should have probably given a better clue. But third person, No, you can have mistaken identities. You can have the individual who looks like as innocent as driven snow, whatever driven snow is, forgive the cliche. But yet when we jump into that person's point of view at the very end, legitimately, we can see that they are the killer. So that's one of the tricks of the trade. And then rewrite. Hemingway said there are no great writers, there are only great rewriters. And we do a lot of that up until the very last minute.
Yeah, we do. Actually, Barbara has a favorite story about Jeff and his penchant for rewriting, and I'm the same way though that Jeff is.
That's true. Well, it wasn't my story; it's Jeff's story. Do you remember years and years ago we were having this conversation, and somebody asked you about, how hard was it for you to let go rewriting and editing, and you said if they would put a trapeze over the printing press while it was spinning, you would hang by your heels from the trapeze and continue to edit
with
your
a
book.
little pen, just
That's
to
right,
do this.
just as it was disappearing. So, I think Sanchez and Heron, obviously, if you're going to have a successful series, you have to have protagonists that people can relate to. But I think the most successful thrillers really ride on the antagonist. If you don't have a great villain, then everything else kind of falls flat because there's not the threat isn't sufficient, the effort to thwart it isn't sufficient. So I've always thought that you were particularly good, Jeff, at villains.
Yeah, well, the villain has to be just a notch better than the hero. Look at a bad made-for-TV movie, and I've had TV movies. I hope none of them are bad, but look at a bad one. Who's the villain? Well, the muscle guy has my hairstyle, but a ponytail. Forgive me if there are any bald men here with ponytails, but they just and a leather. He's got a leather jacket on, and a scar. And who's the ultimate bad guy? It's very easy. He owns a drug company or an oil company, and there's no development of those characters. But we want rich, engaging villains who have not only the same intelligence as our hero, but better resources. And not only that, but they have one little added element. They have no compunction. They can do evil without a single thought, which kind of brings up our relationship between Jake and Carmen. Now, Jake is somebody who was a black hat hacker. And if you know hacking, know that term. Black hat hacking was somebody who, he was kind of a Robin Hood, but he was still committing illegal acts, hacking into bad people. And, like banks and getting pictures of women from birthday parties. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to bring that up in the latest current events, but he was hacking into bad people's records and sending it to the government and getting them into trouble. But Carmen is a sworn law enforcer, and so clearly there's going to be tension there because she has to color within the rules, and that's been a source of some tension between them.
And whenever I would write the Carmen scenes, I always brought her frustration up, which was always my frustration working in law enforcement. It was always like, we have to follow the rules. The bad guys don't, or the bad gals, as the case may be, but they don't. And it was so frustrating sometimes because sometimes you literally knew who did it, but you couldn't legally prove it. And so you had to let them go. And how frustrating is that? And I want to kind of, I wanted to sort of bring up some of that frustration. And so it was kind of fun because Jake, Professor Heron, he didn't have any of those compunctions. He's like, they're guilty. Let's just go get the evidence or whatever. It was kind of fun because sometimes writing with Jeff, it would be like that, because he never had a gun and badge. And he would, and this is another fun thing with our like editing back and forth. He'd just be like, "Oh, we're just going to do this and that," and I'm like, "No, we can't do that."
She would say, "There's this little thing called the Fourth Amendment," and Jake would say, "Picky, picky, picky." I'm sorry. Are we going to let the bad guy go? And but but actually, that's another source of tension between them. And Jake expands a little bit to her side, and she expands a little bit to his side because that's the way the real world works.
Yeah, they both had to adapt to each other a little bit. I mean, in the beginning, they were kind of thrown together, like against their will, really. They didn't like each other at all. And they were kind of like forced to work together, which is also kind of fun, a fun dynamic to do with a couple of characters. And, so they continue to be thrown together, and now they're kind of partners. And it's interesting and kind of fun to write them.
Yeah, we've again, the same but different. So we're creating a more complex relationship between the two. And of course, in the third book now, not giving anything away, but man and a woman, and they are, who knows what's going to happen. But I'm sorry, we can't let them get away with that. There has to be maybe a third element, a third person involved to stir the pot a little bit. And actually, if you add yet another person, man, stir that pot up a little bit, and people are going to be turning the pages. I don't care. They find the killer or not. I don't care. Are they going to get together at the end? Well, we're suspense authors. We're going to leave you in suspense, so we can't say anything more. But you got to buy the book to find out.
Absolutely. We're very mean that way.
But haven't even written it yet, so how can we?
Because we've already talked about it. That's the whole
okay.
brainstorming thing.
We have an outline. I mean, it's in a very preliminary stage, but we do. And so.
So Jeff, let's talk about the stakes for a minute. I mean, we've talked about you have to have a really bad character, but if they're just fighting over, who's cooking dinner or something, it isn't really. Well, I mean, so you not only have to have a great villain, but you really have to have something major at stake for all the characters, or the whole thing, falls apart.
Very good question, Barbara. It's kind of the Goldilocks rule. If the stakes are too small. So maybe, say, a literary crime novel of some sort, literary mystery. There's a book hidden in a library somewhere that the protagonist has to find that has, the secrets to a crime in the past. It could be intellectually kind of interesting. Doesn't really move me. I want more dynamic. On the other hand, if it's like existential nuclear war, I was on an airplane watching, because I refused to actually validate the latest Mission Impossible series. Why? Because I watched the original Mission Impossible, which is the only Mission Impossible, on this thing called television years ago. Barbara Bain, Peter Graves, and John Landau. Those are the only things. Martin Landau. That's the only one that meant anything. I'm sorry. There's like 5 hours of trying to find two little keys. Have you seen it? This final last, maybe next to end reckoning or something. It's like going on and on and on, and I cannot figure out what the hell is going on. But what's the end result? You get these two keys, you turn them in, you launch nuclear missiles. Oh, I don't care. Blow us all up, for heaven's sakes. But somewhere in between is let's say, a single village is at risk, a small village, because of a nuclear accident. Then my palms are going to start to sweat, especially if we see the villagers there. And so that's where the stakes have to be focused and yet big enough that we keep turning pages. I did an interview in England a long time ago, and when you do interviews as an author, it's kind of softball. They're not. They just want to fill time until they get like a real guest on, that is a sports figure, and fill the time with an author. And we're there to hawk the book. That's fine. But this interview was a little bit different. So I go into the live BBC studio, and the presenter says, "Mr. Deaver, what do you say to the charge that you are manipulative?" And I don't think quickly at all, hence the outline and so forth. But I had a moment of inspiration, and I said, "What do I say to that?" I say, "Thank you." Because I am manipulative. These books are manipulative. We want the readers to be, to get on a roller coaster. And roller coasters are manipulative too, and horror films are manipulative. They should be. That's what genre entertainment is about. They throw the cat at you, a jump scare. Well, the cat is not the villain. The only thing you're worried about is the cat going to fall, but now it's a CG cat, so you don't have to worry about that. And so but you jump anyway because that's the way the game works. And so that's what we do. I like to be manipulated and find that threat that's going to manipulate you and go with it.
And I often have a lot of people that will tell me, they're like, oh my gosh, I stayed up half the night. I lost all this sleep reading this book. I couldn't stop reading it. And I'm like, okay, sorry, not sorry.
I don't care.
And I always say, if you're losing sleep, I'm doing my job.
Yeah, these should be ideally, Isabella's books herself, mine, and our joint books. They should be one sitting reads if possible. Now, I know you guys have jobs. You go to school. We don't care. It's not our problem. But we kind of would like you to read quick. Let's say give them 2 days, right? Yeah. Out of kindness, we'll give them 2 days. But that's what this should all be about. And another interesting thing that we're both been aware of. There's a lot of competition out there from this stuff called streaming television, from video games. More money involved there, more revenue than Hollywood, all Hollywood films combined, video games. And these are short, soundbite kinds of forms of entertainment. And we have been very conscious of making sure that we are able to compete against that, because books are the best creative form of entertainment there is. Come on, haven't we all been to that museum? You go to MoMA, whatever. After 20 minutes, oh, it's a beautiful painting. Where are we going to go to drinks afterwards? And then you go to the Met, and oh, that's thrilling. You heard the one aria, the Queen of the Night, from the Magic Flute, and you're thinking, where are we going to go for drinks afterwards? But with a book, oh, that's different. You're part of that story. You participate with the author. And that's why we try to, compete with this shorter attention span, the soundbite type of mentality now. And it doesn't do any good to say, oh, well, it shouldn't be that way. I'm sorry, that's normative. That doesn't work. What you have to say is, this is the way the entertainment field is right now, so we're going to meet that. So we have 72 chapters in the book. There's more dialogue. There's not a lot of introspection. And there's, the action and the drama is revealed through the dialogue and through what the characters do, not what they say or think. And, the response has been good to that.
Yes, actually, I've been asked several times, and I do teach. Jeff teaches writing courses. I've been specifically asked to teach on writing action scenes in particular, but part of it is because for me, character is revealed through action. So you don't need to write a leisurely character study, which is not what we write anyway, but in order to reveal character. Because think about it in your real life. I mean, the good fiction does reflect life. People, what you do reflects who you are. It isn't so much what you say. It isn't all the jabbering. It's what are you doing? And that's what we write. And there are times, and we do, because we write complex characters, there's times, and you can tell they're deluding themselves. And that's fascinating. I can't tell you, that's fun to write. That's like next level. It's like you're on a trapeze and you're flying as high as you can when you're, you know that you're getting into their own delusion, and the reader is there with you because you all are thinking about it. And by the way, you all are readers, and all of you all watching as well. Brain science has shown that reading books is so much healthier for your brain than any other form of entertainment. Watching TV or streaming or whatever, reading books, it's so good for your brain. From the time you're little and you first learn till where you're 100 years old, everything in between, you are actually really doing yourselves a favor. And thank you for reading our stuff.
Yeah, exactly. And there's a some neuroscientist, I can't remember who it was, I heard her on NPR, who said that the reading process, and I'm not a scientist, I took math for writers to get out of college. Imagine that course. But she was saying that the act of reading adjusts the brain. I mean, it changes the brain itself. And so that, maybe doing Wordle does the same thing. I don't know. It might, but reading books, following the story, and getting involved absolutely is good for your mental health. Even reading the happy, cheerful little bunny books that we write, maybe get that frustration out. Yeah, the cable guy.
Let me add, kiddo, that they've also, a lot of these studies have shown that reading print books is far better for you than trying to read a digital book.
Oh, I believe that.
The interaction with the text on paper is a completely different thing than having the digital stuff just scroll by.
I know from the rewriting process that I go through, whether my book or our joint books, I'll go through, probably 40, 50 rewrites. Now, the last rewrites are just very much fine-tuning, but the first ones are on the computer because you may want to, move chapters, cut and paste a chapter. Or you may want to, you don't like that name, so you globally search and replace a name or something like that. But then you have to print it out and read the printed book because you see things there that you did not see on the screen. And finally, and I'm very insistent to my students that they have to do this, you have to listen to the book. Word, Microsoft Word, has a function, read aloud, and I don't submit a single thing unless I've listened to the book. I turn the speed down somewhat slow, and then I follow along, and the cursor jumps from word to word, and you can stop it and edit as you go. But you'd be amazed at how many, you'll find typos, certainly, although this is the last stage, so there shouldn't be too many typos. But also things like, the character changed his shirt twice in the same paragraph. You looked at it 100 times, but there it is. And some plot points too, major plot points you'll miss. But I would strongly recommend that, whether you write fiction or memos or something like that, it's a process. We Isabella and I take this as seriously as if we were pilots. Nobody's life is at stake. However, the life of your spiritual or your creative life is at stake, and so we want to make sure it's as we treat it as seriously as possible. And so that's just kind of the final step before it goes off to the editor, and then they come back with stuff that we missed anyway, which is really irritating, but that's what they're there for. So, do we have any questions from you all?
But before you do that, what are you each working on now?
Oh, yeah, I keep forgetting that.
Right.
This is a business, remember?
Right.
We keep forgetting that. Isabella, what are you up to? The woman who's doing 5 books next year.
I know, right? Yeah, so, we obviously are each writing our own stuff as well. So I have the Nina Guerrera series that's done, that's a trilogy, and I have the Danny Vega series that's done, and that's a trilogy. And then I had the Veranda Cruz series that's set here in Phoenix, and that had been 3 books for a long time, but I am now finally writing the 4th book that I had been wanting to write for years. I know, right? So many people I've gotten hundreds of emails from people going, when are you going to write another Veranda Cruz? So I am, and it's going to come out next spring. And then so I'm also kind of revitalizing other books in that series as well. So between those books and then the one, Jeff and I will also have one coming out next year. So that will be a total of 5 novels coming out for me next year. It's going to be pretty busy.
And I have a new Lincoln Rhyme book next year. The title's The Collateral Heart. That's out. That'll be out in May of next year. I'm now writing a new Colter Shaw book. Colter Shaw, the character, that's the basis for the Tracker CBS TV show. I also write original short stories for Amazon Original Stories. And I have one of those coming out next year titled Bulletproof. Yeah, that's Bulletproof. And then I have a new short story collection coming out. That'll be my 4th, I think. My 4th collection. and that's entitled Dead Ends. And that'll be out with an original Lincoln Rhyme and an original Coulter Shaw. And most of the stories you will not have seen, because I write a lot of stories. I've written 110, 120 stories, and many of them are for like giveaways at writers' conferences. They're for publications in Germany, Japan, the Czech Republic that never appear in America. So if you see that, Barbara will have it here in the store, Dead Ends, and they'll be almost all original stories. You may have seen one or two, but those will, that's it. And I feel like a slacker, though, compared to you. So
No, not at all.
So that's all next year?
that's all next year.
Wow.
I feel tired
Yeah, I
now.
know.
Wow.
We're exhausted.
Please.
How do you guys keep track of your characters that you don't put a Coulter Shaw in another book? Because you've got so many things going. The book. How do you keep track?
Well, for me, I make sure that I don't write. The process is outlining and then writing. I don't outline two books at the same time. I don't write two books at the same time. So there's really no risk of that happening. I'm sure Isabella and other authors have the mental facility to be able to do that, but I kind of have to concentrate on each project at a time. But I can outline one book and write the prose for another book at the same time. That's not a problem.
Well, we are often in a situation, though, even though you may be like writing, but we often are in the situation where we're editing one book while we're writing another, and that can be tricky. And every once in a while, I have seen a name slip in. Fortunately, it's not a whole plot point; it's just a name. But yeah, that has happened, and it's kind of like I will catch it and be like, "Man, why am I thinking about him?" And but it's the editing, and that can be challenging. It is mentally draining. I have a joke with my husband when I'm done writing. I'll sort of stagger away from the desk, and he'll look at me and be like, "Okay, right, you left it all on the field, right?" I'll be like, "Yes, it's exhausting. It is. It's mentally draining because you really are holding to do the edits. You're holding an entire plot here, and then you're holding an entire plot there, and then I imagine with you're holding short stories, so you have to have those small plots also holding it."
Your question brings up another issue, and I'm often asked, whom am I reading? And the fact is, working this much, I don't really read a lot of other fiction. I read a lot of nonfiction research for the books. And another reason for that is that we authors are sponges. We absorb everything, life, observation, including other authors. And so I was writing a book, a Lincoln Rhyme book, and John le Carré, who passed away a couple of years ago, the British spy writer, maybe my favorite genre writer. And I said, I can't pick up his book until I finish mine. I can't read it while I'm writing another one of my own books. So an hour later, I bought his book, of course, and I'm reading it, and read it in one day. Oh, amazing! Go back to writing my Lincoln Rhyme book, not paying much attention to it. Then I go and read, doing the rewrite, as I mentioned, and suddenly there's like a New York City cop. This isn't exactly like it was, but it was very similar. And the cop says, "Bloody hell, what's that chap over there doing?" And I thought, I've been infected, and so I have to be very careful about that, because that's one of the things that's so great about being a writer. We have such a sense of curiosity, and we learn things and we put it down on the page, but we have to be a little careful about that, because readers are very perceptive. So, anybody else have a thought, please?
Yeah, so I was curious on this collaboration thing. You guys both have careers, individual careers. What were some of the challenges you guys had collaborating with both of these books and this future book? And also, the second part of that is, what have you learned from her and what has she learned from you?
Well, I have to say, nary a speed bump. If we disagree about a creative element, we talk it through, and that's all there is to it. And the subject in my courses, I don't really talk about collaborative writing because I've never done it before. It doesn't really come up. But if I did, I would say it's got to be fun. You know, you have to have fun. You have to work with somebody you respect and whose company you enjoy and who's temperamentally suited, and that's definitely our case. So there was just no adjustment involved. The one thing I've learned, and this is little technical things, you know, because we both know how to put a book together. That's nothing fundamental. But the one thing I did learn from Isabella, which is great, that I would go through and I'd give like chapter or section numbers for all of my headings in the outline. Stupid idea. Because he said, chapter 21. What the hell is chapter 21 about? Her idea was to write a very brief synopsis of what happens in chapter 21. And maybe with a keyword so you can search it. And so our outline has the keywords, the synopsis, maybe, you know, Jake and Carmen discover a clue at the nightclub. And then, I still don't know how to do this, by the way, she hyperlinks so that you click, let's see, it's like alternate click on that, and that takes you right to that chapter, which is absolutely brilliant. So that's one of the many things I've learned, but that's, you know, a significant mechanical thing.
Right. Well, actually, you also talked about the springboards.
Yeah, Isabella's this great idea at the end of the. Now, we've always propelled readers through our books. I've done that from the very beginning. She's done that too, but she came up with the motif of a springboard at the end of each chapter, so that we. Oh yeah, did I mention the word manipulative? We manipulate the reader into having to turn the page. And sometimes if we're feeling in kind of a feisty mood, we don't resolve that springboard question for 2 chapters, sometimes 3 if we're in a really bad mood. And but it is resolved, has to be resolved. So that was something else I learned too.
Yeah, that was one. I mean, I know, you know, for him, I would like cut chapters and, you know, chop them and make them short and, you know, splice them up. Now, for me, I learned some organizational skills from Jeff because he is an inveterate outliner, and he will tell you this. In the beginning, I mean, I always outline, but my outlines were like maybe 15 pages. His were like 60 pages, and then they would grow from there. So I did not have that level of outlining, and so it was nice to sort of kind of see how he pulled that off. I mean, I was just, like I said, I was kind of a different way of doing it compared to that, but this is better. And especially if you're writing with someone else, this is definitely better. The other thing that I was really, really pleased with working with him is when we would declare the no ego zone, that I mean, he's allowed to have an ego. I mean, he's been at this a long time. He's sold 50 million books and, you know, published in, I don't know what, 125 countries and all these things. So, you know, kind of worldwide phenomenon. So he could, but he doesn't. And this is something that he and I both agree on, but we actually verbally brought this out to each other in the beginning, which is, we are here to serve the reader, not our egos. We just want to write the best story we can. And so if we need to cut something, we'll cut it. And we can trust each other. I mean, I implicitly trust his judgment. He knows what needs to be cut. And so I think that was another sort of learning thing, and being able to cooperatively do that. And again, I think this is different from other co-authors' models too, where it isn't like, you know, someone's the lead sled dog and then the other one's always behind him with the same view. This is not that. So we're both like working together, yoked, and, you know, really our whole drive and purpose is make the story better, please the reader. That's the goal.
Kind of hard to ask a question after that, isn't it? Right, Patrick, is there an online question?
Yeah, there are a couple of them.
Do you want the microphone?
Yes, I guess. Okay, that's better. Okay, there's a question from our own PK who's watching. And he says, does Isabella find writing as exciting as law enforcement? So, you'll need that.
Well, maybe, I don't know, in a sense, I guess there's quite a few dead bodies either way. But this case, the bodies are only fictional, so that's a bonus. Yeah, in many, it's funny because I had another author one time ask me a while ago if it was harder to write or to be a cop, and I'm like, no, that's not a legitimate question. It's harder to be a cop. It really is. Because, and this is, if things don't go well, I will say this, in writing, the only thing that will get hurt is your feelings, or maybe, your psyche in some way. It's not quite the life and death stakes, but I will say this, it is extremely exciting to write. And especially, when you see your books succeed, and people in other countries are reading them and they get this level of success and stuff. And then you meet other cool writers along the way, like Jeff. And so that part is definitely fun in a different way.
Let's see, there's an interesting question about, you both write various different series, different protagonists. Do you kind of envision them all in the same world at the same time? Is there a way that, Catherine Dance and Lincoln Rhyme and all of your characters, Jeff, could ever conceivably meet in one book?
Yes, indeed. In fact, Catherine and Lincoln met in The Cold Moon. And I think he appeared in Roadside Crosses, one of her books as well. I have I have to be somewhat careful as a legal matter because CBS owns the rights. They don't own I can write anything I want. I can blend characters, that's not a problem. But if I were to sell a story idea for Coulter Shaw, that's CBS. They own the Coulter Shaw characters. That's Paramount, and I don't know. Everybody's owned by Disney, I think, nowadays. Even I am owned by Disney, apparently. But and then Lincoln Rhyme is owned by NBC Universal. So I can combine the characters, but if I do that, then I cannot sell the story to one network or the other. So I have to be kind of careful about that.
What about you, Bella? Could all of your characters conceivably meet up?
It's funny. It's actually talking to my agent about that because I have had many, fans say, "Hey, let's do a mashup. This would be fun." And there's a little bit of like what Jeff is talking about. Now, I do have the same publisher for everything, so book-wise, it's no problem, and then also intellectual property-wise, it's no problem. But I can't announce anything at this point, but I've got a little bit of Jeff's issue where there's some different things in development that could make it a challenge going down the road. So, but yeah, it would be so much fun. I'd love to do a mashup.
I think that's about it.
Sorry, anybody else in the room have a question? Well, this has been,
Well, thank you.
yeah, it's a book launch, so let's give them a big round of applause,
Thank
even
you.
bigger than usual. Right. Oh, Lord. And
Maybe we'll sign some books as long as we're here.
we're
so
going
why
to do
not?
that, right? So you can get your books signed and take photos and all that fun stuff. And thank you very much for coming out. Virtual audience, thank you for joining us.
So, I think, actually, here we are. I think that lady is here.
Okay, well, you can find out.
Yeah.
I will get pens for you. Or you have
I don't.